Hey everyone, I'm Marty Berman, and this is the MarTech Memo podcast, where we break down how AI, RevOps, and MarTech are reshaping frontline execution. My guest looked at what brands pay big tech to find customers and decided there had to be a better way. So he built Disco, a network where independent brands pool data and merchandising to cut acquisition costs with backers like Shopify, Felicis, and Bessemer. 5 years at Facebook, a stint at a firm, and now a founder who can go deep on first party data as well as how deep on where to ski. Conner Sherline, founder and CEO of Disco, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Marty. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. We're excited. So look, Disco's whole bet is brands pooling first-party data to lower their customer acquisition costs together. What pooling first-party data work as a cooperative when individual brands couldn't crack customer acquisition cost alone? What made the pooling of the first-party data work?
Yeah, I mean, in SMB, which is where we started in our bread and butter, you have to think about the brands that we serve and the types of data that they have. If you sell, Grooms is a good example. They're right here. I sit in one of my investors' office who actually invests in consumer brands. So spend a lot of time and energy around consumer brands outside of actually working directly with them. But you have a limited amount of data. They know who buys gummies and they
Right.
know and that's it. Like they sell two or three products. They have a few different SKUs. They've got their Cubs, which is for kids, and they've got their adults, and they have different variations of that. But that's only one segment of the population. And, within Shopify, the vast majority of the brands that are on Shopify have less than 50 SKUs. They're not marketplaces by nature. They have a limited amount of products, but they have a good amount of shoppers like within their own world. So I think it's unique in the sense that Shopify and in that universe and within the SMB universe, they have a limited amount of data, but they have like rich customer data. So the
Right.
idea, okay, well, you have a little bit and you have a little bit, you have a little bit, you have a little bit. And now let's like all put it together and what can we learn from, from that collective data source and how do we use it in targeting across the network, and how do we use it to just inform you more about your shoppers, things that you didn't know.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this a little bit just to kind of add on to that, like that in those initial conversations, because sharing of data was always kind of talked about, like in terms of when Google was depreciating the first party cookie and the clean rooms and everything. Like, what were those initial conversations with when you started to move up from SMBs to like the enterprise brand?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that when you get, there's two things to think about with data. There's the breadth and there's the depth. So
Right.
the breadth, we ended up after the first few years of the company getting to a huge amount of breadth, and the breadth, it's about 160 million US e-commerce shopper profiles,
Right. Right.
name, phone number, email, like everything about them, like is within that collective brain. And sort of by happenstance, we had moved from that SMB cohort into the enterprise cohort, and our need to enrich or add to that data source ended up becoming less and less, like as we grew, because you have that breadth. Well, depth, you can do a lot of things to get better depth. You can work with
Got it.
partners. You can enrich with other
Third
sources,
party sources.
Asia,
Yeah.
third-party sources. You can mine, like using AI, you can start to mine the similarities and the scores and come up with psychographic criteria and test against that. So it becomes less and less important at that point to like have every single one of those enterprise brands join that collective co-op. So it's given us a lot of flexibility. There still definitely is an advantage for our publishers to share some information with us.
Yeah.
Typically, what we do with that information now, though, is we are using our own collective intelligence, what they bring to the table, and using that in our auction and delivery system to drive the best outcome.
Hmm.
But our structure can be flexible, which means if you don't want to operate with us as a data business, like, you don't have to. Uh, and we have that, kind of slew of options with the benefits
Right.
associated with options sort of for whoever we decide to work with, whoever decides to work with us rather.
Got it. Got it. And so, kind of building off of that, what broke as you scaled to 1,000 brands, and what did you rebuild to keep that growth predictable? Because I know that's sort of an interesting story.
For sure. Other than the infrastructure and the scale, which obviously breaks as you add more and more and more variables, there were a few other things that broke. One was the ability for us to make everyone get an equal amount of value out of the data that they were contributing. So the way to think about that is you're giving and you're getting, like that give and
Right,
that
right.
needs to be kind of a similar vector. And when we were initially building the company, it was, sort of a similar type of cohort. And
Got it.
that
Yeah.
question of equity or what you were getting in return became more palpable, I would say, as we like scaled into our second and third year, where we had to think about that. We'd be like, okay, well, how do we provide more value to the larger constituents and contributors to the network? And we're landing on that is sort of changing some of our value props on the publisher and the advertiser side. So like our publishers get paid for hosting our placements, our advertisers are paying to show up in those placements. And we ended up becoming more of your traditional commerce media network when before we weren't paying out anyone or any publishers. We changed models.
Got it.
Then being like, okay, well, if you're going to give us traffic and you're going to put us on your page, then we are going to pay you because you are giving us high value eyeballs to provide advertising to. And that sort of fixed the equity problem because the more traffic you provided to the network, the more you
Sure.
got.
Yeah.
And, that was one of the major things that I would say broke is sort of that value prop not existing.
That value prop. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
interesting. And so just along those same lines though, like, do you feel that like certain like retailers or brands felt like they were contributing a lot more to that first party data and what they were bringing to the table versus how others could use it, so also probably that parity along those lines, like, hey, I'm bringing a real rich database of customer and purchase data. I want to make sure that there's some value, I'm also an equal value I'm getting out of that, right?
totally, totally. And I think the way that we manage that is as you get to a certain scale, well, then none of them are contributing like an overwhelm.
Right. Right, yeah, we talked about that, right? But I would imagine though, once you kinda get 1 or 2 in, then it's like, brands are always aspirational, right? They wanna be with similar brands at their level, so you get 1 or 2 at that, and it probably started to roll a little bit easier at that point.
100%. It did. It's like the more the way that I used to think about it is in every category when I first started the company almost 6 years ago at this point, which is hard to believe. I- we would have an anchor tenant like
Right.
across each one of our cohorts. So, and then what we would do is kind of like similar to raising a round of financing is you get everyone to say yes at the same time. So, if you get one and
Yeah.
they're like, but if then you get a group and you're like, oh, well, this brand, we're talking to this brand and this brand and this brand. You're like, oh yeah, well, we're talking to this brand and this, like to each one of the different brands.
Yeah.
Then you can get them all to say yes at the same time. They're all joining at the same time. And then the value is just already there. What was harder
So
is
this
you're like one by one, and like,
Right.
oh, well, I don't want to be the first mover, and I don't want to be I don't want this. And then when it becomes more of a, oh well, they're all doing it. They're gonna do it. Oh, that person's gonna do it. That person's gonna, okay, great. Like let's do it. And we
So a
would
lot
really
bigger comfort value knowing that you've got this cohort of
exactly,
similar type brands that are coming in within my category, within my vertical. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense.
yeah, like that helped a lot. And then just the more it's like a magnet. The more logos you bring onto the network,
Right,
the more
yeah.
it becomes a more normal thing, and people get more comfortable with that. Yeah.
So I'm really excited to talk about this. So I love your setup now in your go-to-market motion, which we talked a little bit about, and you've really embraced AI to move the needle in your own go-to-market motion. What have you found to be, in this process, like what you've done and where there's still hype of what's going on, and kind of what are you still learning?
Yeah. Well, I'm still learning every single day,
Right.
and I feel like I'm able to take
I
the
always feel like I'm behind every
yeah,
time every day I wake up, I'm stressed. I'm like, oh my God, like what's new? What's changed?
completely agree. And I had my third child 6 weeks ago, and it was, kind of late at night, like just feeling like I was missing so many different things, and it's just would be end up vibe coding like after we went to sleep at midnight to be able to stay up to speed with everything. But I feel like we're seeing this.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We've seen this evolution really in the last 6 months of of AI, starting as a chatbot or a consumer experience and moving into what came about, and I would say in February and March, which is Claude Code and
Hmm.
Cowork and
Hmm.
Codec now. And
Hmm.
that being kind of commonplace, and developers and folks sort of around the team embrace those tools very quickly to embrace the productivity gains that come in single player mode, is like what I call
Right.
it. You're in single player mode, you're working on a project, like you're getting a lot done. What we are sort of obsessed with now, I would say, is just like orchestration and building, not thinking of AI as a tool, but thinking of
Hmm.
it as a team member. How does it, and one of the things I've been really stressing with the team is it's pretty easy to like balk at like a bad result from AI and be like, oh, this is overhyped. And this didn't give me a perfect answer. And I now have created like an anti value or an anti, like a very strong rebuttal to that of, if you onboarded a new employee onto the workforce and their first day on at the job, they like can't tell you where everything is or how it works or what you're
Right.
selling. What do you do? Like, do you balk at them? Do you say, oh, this is not worth it? Or do you put in the time to train them and give them
Right.
the context that they need to onboard them to be a valuable team member? So I would say that is the way that we've approached this. And it started with generalized agents across different functions. Well, it started
Hmm.
with just one agent.
Right.
Like, okay, great. We'll work with one agent. It'll help find information, do things. And then it started to spawn from that into sub agents that are owned by the teams that are responsible for that work. So it's like, how would you onboard a coworker in sales or a coworker in product or a coworker in engineering? And now it's morphing into truly autonomous, like an autonomous company, like 80 of the things like not actually being touched, and jobs really changing from doing work to architecting and managing systems and tinkering and training and management and all of the things. So it's been a wild ride. I would say we're about 6 weeks into that final chapter where, like where we're getting very, very specific on the orchestration and the specialized agents per function.
Hmm.
But I think anyone that's telling you that they've been doing that like longer than, say, or doing it well and trusting it longer than 6 or 7 months is probably lying, because the LLMs like
It,
really,
it it wasn't, they weren't capable of it, and this still is somewhat challenged. How many quick
I,
question, not to change subjects, but like how many different tools are in your go to market motion, like in terms of like what you're pulling from and so forth? Because
yeah,
that's like
we
always a
probably
big topic.
totally. I think we probably have 15 tools that we use across the go-to-market cycle. We use
Yeah,
Gong for all of our call recording,
recordings and so forth.
market
Yeah.
intelligence, use HubSpot. We use another tool called Surf for enrichment and pulling
Hmm.
through. It's like a Apollo or Clearbit.
Okay. Yeah.
We use a bunch of different tools. Granola, that's
Yeah.
like other types of meetings.
Yeah.
So yeah, and all of those now are part of the brain. And
Right.
so people are no longer going on to Gong or going into HubSpot. It's pretty much all through, like, our typical interface is Slack. Like almost everything's happening in Slack, but
Hmm.
connect all the external data sources.
Wonderful. Yeah. I mean, you're, like I said earlier. I mean, you're way far ahead than probably 95% of where people are within the space. I think a lot of people are aspiring to that, but again, it changes all the time. Like the new LLMs are, I just saw something today where I think there was a new, chat GPT model that supposedly is better than Claude. And it's like, it's always going to be changing, but I think you've got to like pick a horse and kind of,
Totally.
you've got to really, I think you can plug and play, but there's certain core tools that you need that you need to build off of that are really critical, that are going to help orchestrate the rest of it and be the brain, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, I've been talking about this a lot because there's been, since the start of the year, everything's been SaaS apocalypse. Like SaaS companies are gonna die, and this isn't going
Yeah.
to, and some of them will die. That's true. But I also then look at the earnings reports for Figma and see like double-digit growth because they've leaned really heavily into agentic workflows, and now they have more users, like agentic users, like building and designing off design systems that live in Figma. And There's probably a lot more CRM customers because you want to spend your effort and your time on things that are bespoke and native to your company and what is going to actually drive value for your customers. And it's not building a CRM system. It's not
No,
built.
exactly.
It's like you should use software, and
Yeah,
you
you
should not
shouldn't
build
you
your own
shouldn't re
CRM system. You should not build your own
exactly.
funnel. Like just because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
Right, exactly. You shouldn't recreate the wheel of somebody's and that's a great point because that question is always, do I build versus buy, right? And there are certain tools you should buy. You shouldn't recreate.
If it's part of your core product offering, you should build it now and you should be the best at it and you should provide it as much context about your business and give it the best judgment it possibly can. And that is highly differentiated and going to be very hard to copy. You should not, anything that's not that, you should buy. You should buy it.
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
I agree.
exactly. I completely agree. So so you've got a great background. Where did you, and we laughed about this last time, but what did you kind of have to unlearn from your Meta and Affirm experience to build a network effects business?
It's a good question. So there's a lot of good things that I did learn. That's for sure.
Which is always good.
Yeah, especially at Facebook. At the time that I was there, it was a very strong leadership team. We had Cheryl, we had Zuck, we had Carolyn, we had a very, very good cohort of Fiji, who's now at OpenAI. Like, it was an awesome time to be there. What I had to unlearn, though, is that every single thing that happens at your own company is your problem. You have to manage it. Like, I look back sometimes at the vacations that I used to take, like when I was at another company and they were truly restorative vacations. And now my vacations are conditionally restorative. They're either like if the company's doing well, my vacation will be great. And if it's not, then I'm probably going to be working like a big portion of the time. I
Just
also
with a
think
better view.
100%. Yeah. With a better view. Work with a better view. The other thing that I had to unlearn though too is just the judgment criteria and the way in which you look at the success of your business is just very different across different categories. And I think for a long time, it was hard for me to understand a world outside of a walled garden. Like when you're building an ad network like from scratch, like you obviously don't have the notoriety and the scale
Right.
and the ability to be as arrogant as Facebook is and was. And what I mean by arrogant is just, Facebook algorithm changes would go live and people would lose millions of dollars that day. And it's just par for the course because it drove so much value and scale. And on our side, it's just we have to be much more beholden to advertisers. We have to be much more careful on the changes that we make and be way more forthcoming with those kinds of effects that might happen on the network.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of an interesting, like I never had a problem getting a meeting or people wanting to meet when I worked at Facebook. And now on the other side, it's like you get a little bit of humble pie. That's for sure.
Yeah, without it, in my career, I've always worked at big name brands and then, smaller brands that maybe didn't have that same recognition, but none like, at any of the FANGs, any of the major, the Facebooks, Googles, Microsofts. It's a completely different ballgame. First of all, yeah, your emails are getting answered, your calls, your meetings you're getting, and you have the ability because you have such a major impact on someone's business to actually make changes and tell them what's going to happen as opposed to, being, cautious to make sure that they're okay with it and that you're informing them of it. And, yeah, there's nothing more humble than having to go out with no brand name and no, limited recognition to try and have those conversations because it's really has to be more of a collaborative partnership
Yeah.
experience with your customers as opposed to, you know,
Yes.
as opposed to dictating kind of like what's going to happen and here's how it's going to work.
Yeah. I guess the way that I would describe that too, just as a juxtaposition between Facebook and what we're building at Disco is Disco's a B2B2C company. So like we don't get
Right.
access to consumers unless we work well with the businesses that we serve.
Right.
And, Facebook is a consumer business with an ad network
Exactly.
implemented on top of it. So the prioritization, like from the top down, will always be the consumer metrics. Like the ads business is just not like, you know, Zuck is not paying as much attention to that as he is the consumer components of the business. So it was just kind of like deal with that.
Well, it's certainly been well documented, and it's I just saw that the next movie from Aaron Sorkin's coming out.
Nice. Ooh, I'm
Yeah,
excited about that. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, exactly. It looks like it's going to be a good one. No shock. So, final question, and I don't know that there's necessarily one retail media signal brand should watch out for, but like, where do you think they kind of what's one or a couple maybe that you think that they get wrong in terms of the signals that they're looking at?
With regards to retail media networks,
Yeah.
retail media networks are at this really interesting crossroads where the biggest ones have entered into a place where they have saturated all the available inventory within their
y-
website.
Yeah.
So endemics, like that's what they call an endemic and
Hmm.
non-endemic. In retail media, endemic is really at a saturation point. If you look across those that are publicly traded and you look at the
Hmm.
growth rates that existed within the first few years and sort of where they're landing now, they're getting to this plateau. And it's because they can only open up so much more inventory and placements within their checkout flow, sponsored listings, search, all of those things, right? So what we're seeing is a very interesting turning point where maybe a year or two ago, they would say, absolutely not. We're not sending anyone off of site. Like we're not going to direct traffic. We're not going to do anything
Yeah.
non-endemic. There's now an appetite for it. And I'm seeing a huge trend across retailers looking for other ways that they can monetize their site experience. So for us, it's literally what we provide is non-endemic solution for retailers to make more money off of all the different touch points that they own using our data layer and our collective
Hmm.
intelligence to help drive that. That is something that I think most retail media networks are missing out on is the ability to actually juice their revenue while keeping their consumer experience highly positive for their
Right.
user, but bringing in like the other types of non-competitive offers and products like into their suite so that they can make more money. And their margins are really small. They need it.
Yeah. No, and that's always been a big concern, as I shared my experience working in the retail media space. There was always the endemics, and then we were always bringing in the non-endemics, but, to a certain extent, depending on the relationship with the retailer, but there was always that big sort of like, church and state over driving somebody off, and also what kind of, other outside brands they would accept,
Yes,
right? That's always a big concern because they don't wanna make it so disparate from what they're kind of offering, and so finding that sweet spot where you guys probably come in is being able to really help them understand, like, here's a cross section of your audience, and these types of brands and these
yes,
verticals would really make sense based on the information and that first party data of what else your consumers are buying.
totally. That is exactly the way that we talk about it is your shoppers are looking for other things beyond what you sell, and it
Right.
could be an additive rewards experience, like where you are actually rewarding your shoppers for and giving and increasing the value of the brand while also making money. Those two things typically in the world of advertising, and I think it really has to do with the origins and the history of the industry, which is look at what happened to the publisher internet, Outbrain and Taboola, not to throw shade, but they really, really damaged the user experience of those websites. Like now, AI is disintermediating them all even more than they already were because you can just ask for a recipe from ChatGPT and you don't have to go to that website with like 16 different pop up that are like in between you and the ingredients of what you're cooking,
Yeah,
right?
right,
Right.
right. It's
So I think
100%.
there's a
Like, I hate that experience. It's like
it's
you're like,
awful. It's
yeah,
so
it is an
so
awful
retailers
experience.
naturally, like, and they should be, are naturally very anxious that that's gonna be what happens to them if they allow non-endemics onto their website. And what we're trying to say is, like, that is not what we do. Like, we're not like programmatic ads, like, shoved in to different
Right,
placements so that you can make more money, like, add a pop-up here and a reel there and
right.
a video in between checkout. Like, that's not what we're proposing. What we're proposing is elegant, designed well, additive to the user experience, and will drive you money. And I think that that's probably why there's such like a like, oh, I don't know if we should do that. And when they see the designs and they see the way that it works, and they see the user flows and they see the places they can put it, it definitely they're like, okay, this isn't exactly what I wasn't thinking. It wasn't my mental model wasn't correct on this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So.
Awesome. Well, listen, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today and look forward to talking again soon.
Likewise. Thanks so much, Marty. It was great to talk to you.